Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is the Madden 25 Guy. Today we're going to be going over the rosters for all 32 teams in the NFL in my franchise. If you haven't yet, please check out that first video that I posted yesterday. Just gives you kind of an intro to the series, to the channel. This video probably won't make much sense if you haven't seen that yet, so just go check that out. But with that being said, without further ado, let's get into the roster, starting with the Chicago Bears. For them, it's just mostly former players from the Bears. Charles Tillman, Lance Briggs give them pretty good defense. At quarterback, though, Bears don't have a lot of great talent in terms of recent quarterback play. They got Kyle Orton. They're just a 77 overall. Running back, Matt Forte, they're a lot better. He's a 93. And at wide receiver, they got Devin Hester. Also going to be a very good return man for them. Alshon Jeffrey's there too, though he's only a 74 overall because this was his rookie year. Now, the Bengals are known for taking a lot of chances on guys with off-the-field issues, and that's what they have on this team. In my save, I went through the NFL arrest database, drafted players from there, also guys notable for multiple suspensions, like Ndamukong Suh. At quarterback, though, the one exception of this rule is Carson Palmer. He's a former Bengal, and it'll be good to see him back in Cincinnati. At running back, Ray Rice, 96 overall. He's good on the field. I'll say that much. At wide receiver, Dez Bryant, Josh Gordon, Antonio Brown, and Justin Blackmon. A lot of talent there, that's undeniable. Now, moving on to the Bills, mostly former players with two key exceptions, Cameron Wake and Brandon Browner. Both those guys initially played at one time in the CFL, the Canadian Football League. Buffalo is very close to Canada. Also, Doug Flutie, probably the best CFL player of all time. Most notable in the NFL for playing with the Bills. At quarterback is Andy Dalton, who is not a former player for the Buffalo Bills, but did give the Bills their first playoff berth since 1999 by beating the Ravens, knocking them out of the playoffs. The Bills fans are very gracious, donated tons of money to his charity. Let's see what he'd do actually playing in Buffalo. At running back is C.J. Spiller, and the top wide receiver is Stevie Johnson. Now moving on to the Broncos, mostly current and former players here, including DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller, two guys who will be really hard to block for opposing offensive lines. At quarterback, though, they've got Russell Wilson, a guy who never played for the Broncos, but was taken in the third round of the 2012 draft. The last quarterback taken before him was Brock Osweiler to the Broncos. John Elway has a history of going after tall quarterbacks, Osweiler, Paxton Lynch, Joe Flacco. None of these guys worked out. What if instead he went after a guy who was undersized, fell in the draft because of his lack of height? I think it would have worked out better for him, but we'll find out. At running back, the veteran Willis McGahee, and at wide receiver, Eric Decker, Brandon Lloyd, and Eddie Royal. Moving on to the Browns, mostly former players, so I'm sure you've already noticed Tom Brady at quarterback. Same deal with Russell Wilson. He fell to the 6th round back in 2000. The last team to take a quarterback was the Browns. They took a guy named Spurgeon Wynn out of Southwest Texas State. What if they took Tom Brady instead? At running back, Peyton Hillis, the former Madden 12 cover athlete. Wide receiver, Josh Cribbs, also a great kick returner. Moving on to the Bucs, mostly former and current players. At quarterback, Mike Glennon, the only rookie to be starting in my franchise. Running back, Doug Martin, the muscle hamster. Wide receiver, Mike Williams. Moving on to the Cardinals, again, former players, but with a star quarterback, Peyton Manning, guy who was down to Arizona and Denver as his possible destinations after leaving Indianapolis. As we all know, he chose the Broncos. What if we went to the Cardinals? Running back, Chris Johnson, and wide receiver, Larry Fitzgerald, a guy who never really played with a ton of great quarterbacks throughout his career. What if he got Peyton Manning? Also, DeAndre Hopkins is there. As you know, he will be this season, though he is just a rookie, so he's only a 78 overall. Moving on to the Chargers, again, mostly former players, but with a star quarterback. In this case, is Drew Brees, who started his career in San Diego, then left after the 2004 NFL draft when they ended up with the first pick. Tried to go after Eli Manning, but he refused to come to San Diego, ended up with Phillip Rivers. What if they just stuck with Drew Brees all along? We'll find out. Running back, Ryan Matthews, the former Charger, and wide receivers, Vincent Jackson and Malcolm Floyd. Now, the Chiefs are made up of all players who went to college in either Kansas or Missouri, with one exception, Brandon Albert. I just had to throw in there to strengthen the team a bit, but surprisingly, there's a lot of talent in Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. At quarterback, Josh Freeman, probably the most overrated player on this game, but he's an 85 and went to Kansas State. Running back, Darren Sproles, an 88, also Kansas State alum. Receiver, Jordy Nelson, a third Kansas State product. Moving on to the Colts, again, mostly former players, Dwight Freeney, you see there. Quarterback, Andrew Luck, it'll be good to see him back. Unfortunately, he had to retire early due to injury. At running back, Trent Richardson, probably we don't think that as being a great player, but the Colts actually traded a first-rounder for him. Wide receiver, T.Y. Hilton, and Hakeem Nicks. Moving on to the Cowboys, they are America's team, and America loves an underdog, so the Cowboys star players are all FCS or below players, no FBS guys. including their quarterback. They get to keep their former quarterback in Tony Romo. He went to Eastern Illinois. Running back Fred Jackson at Coe College. And wide receivers Marcus Colston, Miles Austin, another former Cowboy, and Cecil Shorts. Moving on to the Dolphins, these guys mostly Miami players. I cheated a bit. I threw in Miami, Ohio as well because they're not a ton of great quarterbacks from the U. They got Ben Roethlisberger there at quarterback. Running back Frank Gore. Wide receiver Andre Johnson, Reggie Wayne, Leonard Hankerson, and Travis Benjamin. A lot of good offensive players there. For the Eagles, we have mostly former players, including a couple of key offensive players that Coach Chip Kelly got rid of. Quarterback Nick Foles, a guy who won the Eagles a Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Running back LaShawn McCoy. And wide receiver Deshaun Jackson, along with Jeremy Maclin there. For the Falcons, again, mostly former players. Tony Gonzalez, the key name there, a 99 overall. And another huge name, Michael Vick at quarterback. We know he's been huge on Madden with the Falcons in the past. We'll see if he can do that again for them in this game. And running back Michael Turner. And wide receivers Roddy White and Julio Jones. The 49ers, we have mostly former players, including two 99 overalls, Patrick Willis and Vernon Davis. At quarterback, Alex Smith. They had a choice between him and Colin Kaepernick a while ago. They chose to stick with Kaepernick, traded Smith away to the Chiefs. What if they instead decided to stick with Alex Smith? Running back Brandon Jacobs, wide receiver Mario Manningham, and Michael Crabtree. Now, I've been watching a lot of NFL Films videos recently because I miss football. And one of them was called The Jersey Giants, which chronicled the New York Giants' move to New Jersey. The New York City mayor actually called the team foreigners and refused to hold a parade for them after they won the Super Bowl. So the Giants roster here, all their star players played high school football in the state of New Jersey. They got an elite quarterback in Joe Flacco, who's actually a 95 overall in this game. I think he just won the Super Bowl. Running backs, we got Sean Green and Mark Ingram, a couple of good running backs, and wide receiver Victor Cruz. It'll be good to see him back playing for the Giants. Moving on to the Jaguars, their star players mostly played college football at either Florida, Florida State, or UCF, with two exceptions, Maurice Jones-Drew and Mercedes Lewis, who actually happened to both go to UCLA. They were both former Jaguars players, not a ton of great players from those schools at their positions, so I added them in. At quarterback, though, it's Tim Tebow, a guy who was rumored to go to the Jaguars for a while, but never actually did. I thought he helped boost ticket sales there in Jacksonville. What if he actually did end up going? Running back Maurice Jones-Drew, as we said, a Jaguars legend, 94 overall. And at wide receiver, Brandon Marshall, 99, along with Percy Harvin. Moving on to the Jets, we got former players here. DeBrickashaw Ferguson's a 99. Darrelle Revis there as well. Looks like they have a really good secondary. At quarterback for the Jets is Tyrod Taylor, a guy who Coach Rex Ryan was trying to get on the team while he was coaching the Jets. Didn't eventually get him on one of his teams until he went to the Bills. But Tyrod Taylor would have improved on Mark Sanchez and Geno Smith, who the Jets had at quarterback at the time, even though he was only a 73 overall. At running back, Danny Woodhead, and wide receivers Braylon Edwards, Plaxico Burress, and Jericho Cotchery. Moving on to the Lions, probably their two best players in recent years, arguably, were Calvin Johnson and Matthew Stafford. Two bright spots in a fairly mediocre recent years, and even one 0-16 team before Stafford joined the team. But the Lions in this fantasy draft decided to stick with what got them Johnson and Stafford, drafting only players who went to Georgia and Georgia Tech as their star players. That netted them Stafford at quarterback, the guy from Georgia. Tashard Choice, the running back, went to Georgia Tech. And at wide receiver, Calvin Johnson, along with A.J. Green, the Georgia product, and Demarius Thomas from Georgia Tech, three-star receivers on that receiving core for the Lions. Moving on to the Packers, mostly former players here. Clay Matthews, a 99 overall. At quarterback, though, Matt Flynn instead of Aaron Rodgers. Flynn, who had a couple great games for the Packers in relief of Rodgers, but never really got his shot with another team. Didn't really do much outside of the Packers, but he had a couple huge games. I think he threw 7 touchdowns once. Only a 73, but hey, he plays great in Green Bay. Running back Ryan Grant, he's an 80 overall. And at wide receiver, Greg Jennings, Randall Cobb, and James Jones, another great receiving trio. Moving on to the Panthers, again, mostly former players, including now former quarterback Cam Newton. He's a 96. Running back Jonathan Stewart and wide receiver Steve Smith. Nice to see him back in Carolina, as well as Ted Ginn and Brandon LaFell. Now this season, we may get to partially answer the question of who is more important to the Patriots' success, Tom Brady or Bill Belichick, who is known on this game as Chad Masters. No, I'm not making that up. But what about when Brady was in his prime, if he was going to go to a different team? That's what we have in this save. Brady, as I've already told you, is on the Browns. The Patriots now still have former players that Coach Masters brought in. At quarterback, Matt Castle, the only other guy besides Brady to lead the team in passing since 2000. Only other player. Ryan Mallett, also a backup, who Belichick drafted, didn't really work out. At running back, Stephen Ridley and Shane Vereen. Wide receiver, we have Wes Welker, Danny Amendola, and Julian Edelman. A couple of scrappy, gritty, sneaky athletic guys, lunch pail guys, gym rats, coaches' sons, high character players. Moving on to the Raiders, I'm sure many longtime Raiders fans are disappointed. They are now officially moving to Las Vegas, but that's why I've stocked the team full of guys who went to Cal Berkeley, which is just outside of Oakland. Also guys who went to USC, because back when the Raiders were the LA Raiders, they played a lot of their games at LA Memorial Coliseum, which is now the USC home field and was at that time as well. So we got Cal and USC players on this team, including quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who went to Cal, running back Reggie Bush, a great player at USC, and at wide receiver, not very highly rated, but guys who we know turn into great players, and we're only 23 or in terms of Marvin Jones, and 21 Keenan Allen and Robert Woods. Three really good wide receivers today, but weren't at the time of Madden 25. Now, the Rams are made up of mostly former players, with one key exception that I'm sure you've already noticed, J.J. Watt, a guy who most people don't know was actually booed on draft day by the Texas fans. A lot of experts had Robert Quinn ranked as a higher pass rusher. Quinn fell to the Rams 3 picks later. So what if the Texans instead went with Quinn, and Watt fell to them at 14? Add Watt in there just to strengthen the Rams. They haven't had a ton of great players in recent years. By the way, with regard to that bid I just did with the Patriots wide receivers, I tried to look up a 2011 NFL draft that was J.J. Watt's draft grades to try to see why he was booed, why people didn't like the pick. They actually described J.J. Watt in the little synopsis from Bleacher Report as a, quote, high-effort, high-character guy. So there you go. At quarterback for the Rams, Sam Bradford. It'd be nice to see him back in St. Louis. Still St. Louis at this time. His career looked promising at times. He was a bit inconsistent, but really ultimately derailed due to injury. It'd be good to see what he could have done healthy. At running back, Steven Jackson, the longtime Ram, and wide receiver Tavon Austin, the top option there. Only a 79, but he is a rookie, so he should get much better. Now moving on to the Ravens, mostly former players, except for, I'm sure you've already noticed, the two quarterbacks. Back in 2008, the Ravens almost traded their entire draft class that year, every single pick, to move up to the second pick in the draft and take Matt Ryan ahead of the Falcons. They didn't end up making that trade, but what if they did? We'll find out here. And the backup is Colin Kaepernick. The Ravens probably the closest team to signing Kaepernick since he left the 49ers. They didn't end up making that signing, but if they did, he would have been the backup to Joe Flacco. So now he's going to be backing up Matt Ryan, the quarterback the Ravens took in 2008 in this alternate universe. Man, even in a video game, Kaepernick can't catch a break. A backup at 87 overall. Moving on to the running back, it's going to be Justin Forsett. And at wide receiver, Torrey Smith, Jacoby Jones, and Anquan Boldin. Pretty good receivers there. Moving on to the Redskins, we got former players here, including Champ Bailey, who started his career with the Redskins. Most people know him for the Broncos, but that's an interesting one. At quarterback, RG3. Now, this is going into his second year in the league on this game. He had a great rookie year, but then eventually injuries derailed his career. He is a 90 overall. It'd be interesting to see what happened without those injuries. Running back, Alfred Morris, another guy who had a couple huge years for the Redskins, then kind of fizzled out. And at wide receiver, Santana Moss, who had a great career for the Redskins. And Pierre Garçon is there as well. Now, when I think about the New Orleans Saints, I think about what they meant to the city of New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So I tried to stack their team full of guys who either were born in Louisiana, and I had to throw in a couple of LSU players who went to college in the state of Louisiana, at least, like Patrick Peterson. But at quarterback, Eli Manning, all the Mannings grew up in New Orleans thanks to Archie Manning. And running back Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, the law firm, another guy from New Orleans, as well as Mike Wallace, 90 overall, New Orleans native. Dwayne Bowe went to LSU, and Devery Henderson went to LSU and grew up in Louisiana. Now moving on to the Seahawks, and one of the reasons why I started with a fantasy draft for this save rather than using the real rosters is because this was prime Legion of Boom Seahawks on Madden 25. This was the year they destroyed the Broncos in the Super Bowl. The Seahawks now retain some of that Legion of Boom. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner, all there. But at quarterback, they have Matt Hasselbeck, the guy who spent most of his career in Seattle, instead of Russell Wilson. At running back, though, they do get to keep beast mode Marshawn Lynch. And at wide receiver, they got Golden Tate, Doug Baldwin, and Nate Burleson. Moving on to the Steelers, now they have mostly former players here, but with one exception at quarterback. That's going to be Phillip Rivers. Now the 2004 NFL draft class is talked about as being one of the best quarterback classes of all time, with Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, and Eli Manning. The debate's usually between Rivers and Roethlisberger for who's the best quarterback of that group. Roethlisberger has the rings, but he also had better teammates around him in Pittsburgh while Rivers played in San Diego. What if Phillip Rivers instead went to Pittsburgh? Would he have had the same success as Roethlisberger did We'll find out. At running back, Rashard Mendenhall is the starter. Le'Veon Bell is the backup, but he's only a 71 overall because he is a rookie on this game. At wide receiver, Santonio Holmes is a 90 overall. They've also got Lance Moore and Nate Washington. Moving on to the Texans, this team is made up of Texans, guys who played both high school and college football in the state of Texas. At quarterback, it's Ryan Tannehill. Running back Jamal Charles, he's a 94 overall. And wide receiver Kendall Wright, Emmanuel Sanders, there's also Cole Beasley there as the number 4 receiver behind Clyde Gates, actually. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans, this team is mostly made up of players who did play their college football at the University of Tennessee, but I had to throw in guys who went to Memphis and Vanderbilt as well, like their quarterback Jay Cutler, the Vanderbilt alum who's a 90 overall. At running back, they've got Arian Foster at 95 overall, also went to Tennessee, and the backup D'Angelo Williams is an 88. At wide receiver, Denarius Moore, Cordero Patterson, and Robert Meacham. Now, we finally arrived at the 32nd and final team in the NFL, the Minnesota Vikings. At quarterback is going to be Tavares Jackson. He tragically died in a car accident recently, but we're going to honor him by making him quarterback of the Vikings, the team he spent the majority of his career with. Some wholesome content here on the channel. At running back, Adrian Peterson at 99 overall, and at wide receiver, a 36-year-old Randy Moss. I think this was his last year in the NFL, but he's still an 89 overall. And as the second receiver, we have Sidney Rice. There we go, I've finally gotten through all 32 teams in the league. I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope you all like the roster of your favorite team. I hope you guys are excited for this project as I am, and we're finally getting into the first game of the series. Week 1 is going to be Ravens versus Broncos. That should be coming out shortly. I've already recorded it, and let me just tell you guys, this was a great game. You're not going to want to miss it. So until then, I am the Madden 25 guy. Thanks for watching.